Okay, so I want to highlight some progress. There are 2 water treatment plants that were completed in Central America by Agua para el Pueblo this year, 2 chlorinators installed in India, 4 inventions that were created by AguaClara Reach, and the launch of the AguaClara Infrastructure Design Engine. And then on top of that, I am going to do some reflections on where all of this fits into the larger ecosystem of water, sanitation, and hygiene known as WASH. There'll be a little bit of an existential crisis as we think about how this all fits together. And finally, I want to give you a tour of an AguaClara plant. And that'll add a little bit of suspense to the night because we won't know till we get there whether on-shape is going to be a little bit slow. And so it's going to be a dud for showing you, or it's going to all work well and I'll get to show you exactly what's going on. So that's part of the white knuckle suspense for tonight's talk. But first of all, 2 water treatment plants in Honduras and Nicaragua. So the first one was in Huaslala, Nicaragua, the second one in Divina Providencia, Honduras. And these 2 plants illustrate something really cool about maybe about the problem in general and about what AguaClara is doing. In both cases, there were existing water treatment facilities in these communities that didn't work, were abandoned, and these communities were looking for something that actually worked. And so that's kind of one of these insights that there are water treatment technologies out there that don't necessarily perform well enough for what these communities need. So technology does matter. And then let's look inside these plants because, you know, I'm a technologist. I really like the technology, but I should remember there are people involved too, and I should, you know, bring that empathy out and think about the people that are involved. So let's bring some people into this plant. So in addition to the videographer that I don't know, behind the videographer is Heidi Lainez, who is the treasurer of the water board for Divina Providencia. And she received the full training to be a plant operator. So she knows everything about operating this plant. And she's grabbing a sample of water that's exiting the filter system. But we've been interrupted by a little blog from the World Bank that says safe water on tap is not feasible. The gold standard, this is from the blog, the aspiration should be the universal migration to the highest facility level, meaning piped water on premises, available when needed, and free of contamination. Unfortunately, this goal seems unfeasible. So that's too bad. Continuing on, we're back at the plant, and Heidi has grabbed a water sample from the end of the filter, the treated water, and she's grabbing that into a little vial, and she's going to stick that in the turbidity meter, and the turbidity is 0.2 NTU. The standard in the US is 0.3 NTU, and so this water meets EPA drinking water standards. And there she is again. She's measuring the chemical flow rate into the plant, the chlorine or the coagulant. I can't actually tell which one she's measuring. And then I just wanted to highlight this. This is what people are no longer drinking. These are the particles, the pathogens, and the dissolved organic matter that's highly concentrated and is the very small waste stream that is produced by these AguaClara plants. And we do all of that so that we can have safe water on tap. And I contend that safe water on tap is feasible. And it's because AguaClara technologies are designed to produce high quality drinking water while being maintained and operated by communities. So they were designed with the community in mind. And look, it's possible. There is safe water on tap now in the community of Divina Providencia. And this is what I want in my kitchen. Matter of fact, I have one right over there. So a sink where safe water comes out. And think about it, that glass was washed with safe water on tap. It's now being filled with safe water on tap. And if this woman offered it to me, I would happily drink it because everything about that process is safe. It's what I want in my kitchen, and I'd gladly receive this and drink it. And you can prepare your food with safe water on tap instead of contaminating the food with not safe water on tap. And you can wash your face, and you don't have to worry about potentially inadvertently ingesting a few pathogens. Like, this is so cool. Okay, that was two of the highlights, two water treatment plants built in Honduras and Nicaragua. Now, the AguaClara Infrastructure Design Engine facilitates creating new inventions really fast. And this is pretty exciting because while this last year, we've really been focused on creating the infrastructure design engine, which we call AID, although that has been our focus, while we've been creating AID, we've also been innovating along the way. And so here are 4 innovations that we've created. This is an overview. There's a stacked rapid sand filter internal plumbing. There's a more modular chemical dosing system. There's shallow stacked rapid sand filters, and there's central water treatment distributed storage for village water supply, an alternative approach to designing village water supply systems. So all of those are ideas that we've been working on this year. This is the first one. The internal piping inside our filter system is actually rather complicated. There's a lot of pieces. And what we did is we created a system where each layer of that piping is modular, and there's a minimal amount of assembly that actually has to happen while the operator is inserting these parts into the filter box. So assembly inside the filter box is now much simpler. The second invention is a modular chemical dosing system. It simplifies the twice monthly cleaning with vinegar to get rid of the calcium carbonate that precipitates, and it provides automatic removal of air bubbles, things that they've complained about in the current design. And I want to just like zoom in a little bit and show like there's an incredible amount of detail. There are the float valves that actually run or maintain the level of the coagulant and the chlorine solutions in these constant level tanks. You can see the valves, all that is done in great detail. And then here is a pretty dramatic new technology that solves a problem that we found from working with Agua para el Pueblo, that for small communities, there weren't any great options for filters. The previous filter that we designed is very deep, like 4 to 5 meters deep. And that is not really constructible when you get to small sized tanks. And the pipe system that we had also worked on developing was considered too costly. And so this is a first. It is a shallow stacked rapid sand filter. These tanks are about 1 meter deep. It means that they can be constructed easily by a mason, even without the mason doesn't have to get inside the tank to build it. They can reach in, and so the tank can be smaller. And I want to highlight that there are no valves, and if you're really careful, you'll see that I'm lying, and I'll come back to that. There are no valves, there are no pumps, and okay, yeah, there is. There's one valve and there's one pump. It's right there, you can see it. What's funny is I wrote the no valve and no pump first, and I'm like, wait, I should be honest here, but the valve and the pump that is there is what allows you to recycle the water from the backwash, and you don't need that to operate the filter. So it's an optional system. If you don't have electricity, the system still works. You don't need the pump to operate. And a really cool thing about this design is it's open. So it's not closed tanks, it's open so the operator can see what's going on, and you don't have the failure mode of a closed tank where there's no more sand in it because it all got washed out and the operator couldn't see that it happened. So here the operator can observe what's happening inside the filter box. And this extends our range for these filters down to about communities of about 1,000 inhabitants. And then this last invention is a new water distribution system for villages. The approach that's used currently is these elevated storage tanks. This is in India. And on the very top of this elevated storage tank, there is an additional room where there's a chlorine doser for AguaClara that allows them to add chlorine to the water. And that system with this elevated tank and that stairway that goes the whole way up ends up being an expensive system. And so I propose an alternative where with one pump and gravity, you're able to move water from a well to this, yes, elevated water treatment plant, but just elevated a few meters above the ground. And then instead of having an elevated storage tank for the community, you have elevated storage tanks at each household. And those elevated storage tanks are just like 1.5 meters off the ground. And what that does is gives every person or every household the ability to control their own water. And that changes the incentives, where instead of having the goal of grabbing all the water you can when the water turns on, instead, you have a supply of water that is under your control, and your incentive now is to conserve that. This includes a system to make sure that everyone is getting access to similar quantities of water. There's a flow restriction system involved. So innovation is accelerated because we can now build off of the AguaClara Infrastructure Design Engine. That design engine makes it easier for us to create new innovations. So AID, the AguaClara Infrastructure Design Engine, is a set of tools that speed up the innovation process. We can prototype new ideas quickly to explore possible solutions. And AguaClara Reach is committed to continuing to develop improved technologies so that even more communities can have access to safe water on tap. So with this design engine, we can currently provide detailed designs for full water treatment plants with flow rates between 3 and 80 liters per second. And a demo is coming up. And I'll just go there. Look, there it is. And we're going to come back to that later. So the demo is coming up later. But first, I want to do this reflection on where are we in the larger ecosystem of water, sanitation, and hygiene. So here's an equation that I feel like it's been like one of the core concepts that has motivated all of our work. And that is that in order to get to success for a community having safe water on tap, there has to be, assuming if you need a pump to move the water, there has to be a source of energy. There has to be some reasonable education level for the people who end up running the plant, and even for community members, so that they value safe water and are willing to pay the water tariff. There needs to be enough economic activity in the community so that it can afford to pay the water tariff. And the community has to have some level of governance that enables them to manage this system, et cetera. And all the way down to, there has to be a technology that actually works. And if any of these aren't there, it's like having a zero in an equation where you're multiplying. And so if the technology that you try to use is just really awful and doesn't work, that's a zero, and you will not get to success no matter how good the rest of your equation is. And that gives us some insight into what causes failures. We've been really focused on that zero because we've been convinced that one of the reasons why it is common to assume that safe water on tap isn't feasible, as we were interrupted by the folks from the World Bank, we think that it's because there weren't any good technologies. And so it truly wasn't feasible. And so we've been working on that zero, and we'd like to think that we got that zero replaced with a 2. And the reason we like to think of it as a 2 is because now communities that don't have nearly so much money can still afford to run this plant because it doesn't cost much to run the AguaClara technology. But I want to go back to what I highlighted earlier, which was these two water treatment plants, Divina Providencia and Waslala. And the common story is that communities fail to maintain the technologies. So it's very common when a technology fails for the outside observers who are looking at this to say, oh, the community failed to maintain the technology. But remember those two communities, Waslala and Divina Providencia, in both of those cases, those communities had water treatment plants that were abandoned. So we could say that the communities abandoned their water treatment plants. But we know a little bit about water treatment, and we know that the technologies that had been installed actually weren't capable of treating the source water. And so it actually was purely and simply a technology failure. And that is an all too common story where the community is blamed for what's actually either an engineer or some decision maker's error in assigning the wrong technology to a site. So instead of blaming the communities, we realized that the existing technologies aren't good enough for many towns and small cities. And that's why we've been focused on technology as part of AguaClara Reach and trying to make sure that our technologies are designed for the context where they're located. We think there is a big gap where there are many communities between small cities up here, cities that have populations of perhaps 50,000, and villages where there is a need for drinking water treatment, but there aren't any good technologies. There are lots of non-governmental organizations that are working on the household scale and at village scale systems. And at that scale, it is super difficult to contemplate safe water on tap. And on that story, I'm with the World Bank that it's really challenging there. But my contention is that for small communities and all the way up to small cities, it is possible to have safe water on tap. And that's the gap that AguaClara is trying to fill. That's the gap we've identified. So AguaClara Reach and Safe Water on Tap are part of this bigger ecosystem, and I want to identify some of the players. So just so that the alphabet soup doesn't confuse you. So SDG is Sustainable Development Goals, and we're focusing on Sustainable Development Goal 6, and specifically 6.1, which is about safe water. Goal 6 broadly is about ensuring availability and sustainable management of water and sanitation for everyone. An important actor here is UNICEF, United Nations Children's Fund, World Health Organization, WHO, and then just this acronym about this sector, which is WASH, Water, Sanitation, and Hygiene. Okay, so I think there's a contradiction that's hanging out here that we should talk about, and that is that I'm contending that there are literally millions of communities that need safe water that don't have it currently. And so I see this as a million community gap, but not everyone sees it that way. It's also possible to say, what gap? Like, no other organization is working on drinking water treatment for towns and small cities. If they are, I'm waiting for them to identify themselves so we can talk to each other, because we probably ought to share ideas. UNICEF and the World Health Organization emphasize water treatment for households and not for communities. And water sector donors are reducing their funding to Latin America because Latin America is in good shape with respect to Sustainable Development Goal 6.1, which is about having access to safely managed water. So it seems like there is no gap. So this Sustainable Development Goal 6.1, we'll look in more detail at how it works. So the goal is to, by 2030, achieve universal and equitable access to safe and affordable drinking water for all. And we need to know what safe water is. Safe water is free from pathogens and elevated levels of toxic substances at all times. So that sounds really, really great. This is the goal. And if we look at how we're doing, this is now looking at the whole globe. And if you look at the shades of blue for basic or safely managed water, so the two shades of blue, it looks like Latin America, which is sitting right here, is actually doing quite well. And that explains why many organizations are shifting their programs out of Latin America and to sub-Saharan Africa, where there's a lot more yellow and orange, limited, unimproved, and no service at all. But this kind of begs a question. Why is it so hard to find safe water in Honduras and in Nicaragua? Why is it that most small towns and even small cities don't have safe water in those countries? And yet it appears pretty good when we look at this. So let's home in on what's going on in Honduras and Nicaragua. So it looks pretty good in Honduras. There's basic service just about everywhere. There's even some safely managed water in some rural communities, but there's still a few rural communities that have limited service. Nicaragua is doing better for having more safely managed water, but on the rural side, there's more communities that only have limited access or unimproved access or no service at all. So even looking at this, it looks pretty good, right? There's a lot of blue. And so now let's compare what was happening in 2016 for the reporting for SDGs in Honduras and how the Honduran government, the Honduran Water Ministry, reports this. So the Honduran assessment of how many people have water that is fit for human consumption shows a completely different story. And let's look at that. So this is the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals. And if we bring up what the Honduran Water Ministry says, they say this. They say that there's about 10% of rural water that is fit for human consumption. And it's higher, it's like 38% for urban areas. And the remainder is not fit for human consumption. So this raises an interesting question. Why did the Honduran Water Ministry find it necessary to make this distinction between what they were reporting for the Sustainable Development Goals and what they were reporting for what's actually fit to drink? And I think it's because the way the Sustainable Development Goals are defined, when the Sustainable Development Goals refer to safely managed on their top rung, their highest goal, it doesn't necessarily equate to safe to drink. And I've gone and looked, and it's actually pretty confusing trying to figure out exactly how safely managed is defined. And I'm guessing that it is an evolving definition. It focuses on risk mitigation efforts, such as reducing contamination during transport, but it doesn't seem to be clear on what you need to measure and know in order to be able to ascertain that water is actually safe. So it's important to remember that there's these targets and there's goals. The goal was to have safely managed water that was safe to drink for everyone, but the target of safely managed may not be clearly defined enough to actually make sure that we reach that goal. So I'm maybe in a very friendly way adding in here, we should think about safe to drink as the goal and the target. And means that we need to be measuring things that allow us to know that we are actually providing water that is safe to drink. So this is one of the reasons why there's this gap, is that not all safely managed water is safe to drink. And then to make matters worse, we aren't actually on track to achieve safely managed water. And communities really wanted safe water on tap. So here we are 5 years into the Sustainable Development Goals. The world is not on track. Achieving universal coverage by 2030 will require a quadrupling of current rates of progress in safely managed drinking water services, safely managed sanitation services, and basic hygiene services. So we're behind, and it would require a much bigger effort. And the question here is, and this is a question that we like to use in AguaClara, whenever we have something that's just not working, we like to ask, why is this hard? And I realize that there are many, many reasons why this is hard. And I contend that one of the reasons why this is hard is because we're not actually delivering what people want. So the World Health Organization has a drinking water ladder, and this is how we measure progress towards the goal. So you start out at no service, which means you're walking to a stream or a pond or a canal and you're grabbing some water. Unimproved, maybe you have a dug well or an unprotected spring. Improved, you've got an improved source, and I'll get to that in a second, and you have to walk more than 30 minutes to get there, so that's not good. Basic means that it's close enough that you only have to walk 30 minutes or less for a round trip, including waiting in line. And then safely managed is accessible on the premises, so it's a tap in your household, available when needed, and free from fecal and priority chemical contamination, which is what makes us pretty excited. So I want to just put this up there. It means that light blue, which we were thinking of as being pretty good when we looked at Latin America, suddenly doesn't look so good after all, because light blue isn't necessarily free from feces. And I'd kind of like blue to have been clean enough to drink. So basic is not actually safe to drink. And then there's this question about what safely managed means, and still figuring that one out. But let's figure out what does improved means. So improved sources are potentially capable of delivering safe water by nature of their design and construction. So these include piped water and the rest. So did you catch what just happened there? An improved source is water that comes from something that is potentially capable of being safe. Not that it is, but that it's potentially capable of being safe. And piped water, because pipes can deliver safe water, then by definition, if you get water from a pipe, it's improved. I think that was a big mistake to define piped water as an improved water source. So pipes are, by the nature of their design, capable of delivering safe water. And I'm just going to be like a little bit of a cynic for a second. If a pipe can deliver safe water, well, it's also true that a tanker truck that goes around neighborhoods delivering water can also deliver safe water. And so can a jerry can. Matter of fact, my hands can deliver safe water given the right conditions. So if I go down to a stream and I grab some water and I carry it home in my hands and it takes me less than 30 minutes, why isn't that basic water service? Because my hands potentially can provide safe water. Okay, I'm making the case that this is just, it's craziness to say that a pipe gives you safe water. And I also want to take you on this little aside. We're not working in Africa yet. Someday, I hope we will get there. We're talking with folks in Ethiopia currently. But I want to take you to Juba, South Sudan, and show you something that I noticed a while back. And this is related to this question about what is safe water? And if pipes are good enough, what about tanker trucks? Because if you look, here's the bridge crossing the White Nile, and there are trucks lined up sitting right next to the Nile River. And if you look at the road, you can see that there's a dark section in the road. There's a dark path on the road, and I'll just highlight that. And that dark path is because trucks drove down that road, spilling a little bit of water. Those trucks filled up from the Nile, and that's your distribution system. So instead of having pipes as your distribution system, you have tanker trucks as a distribution system. I would like to contend that this is not basic service. This is a lousy way to provide water to a community. It's makeshift, and you do what you have to do, but this is not at all what we should be aiming for. Okay, so now we know that if we walk to this river and we grab water in a jerry can and we carry it home, that is considered no service. What if we go to that river and we install a pipeline and we pipe it to a town? And by the way, this is the water source for Motosili in Honduras, and that is the town of Motosili. So we connect the water source to the town, and now, because it's going through a pipe that's improved, and because it's improved, we can call this a basic water source. Do you catch what just happened in Latin America? Latin America, many communities in Latin America are using surface water sources as their water source. They pipe it to their homes. And so by definition, it's basic. And so Latin America looks blue on the SDGs, but actually a lot of it is river water on tap. If we go one step further, we could instead put a tank in between the river and the town, and we can put a chlorine tank on top of that so that we can chlorinate the water. So now we have the ability to chlorinate the surface water. And I suspect, based on what I've read, although I can't figure this out for sure, that this would count as an improved water source that is accessible on premises, available when needed, and free from fecal and prior to chemical contamination, because it has the potential to be free from fecal matter, because it has a chlorinator. So that may well meet the safely managed criteria. So this is already safely managed. And so when AguaClara comes along and throws a water treatment plant in there, so that now the water goes from the stream to a water treatment plant to the town, and we finally get water that is safe for human consumption, we're already at safely managed. We were there when we were just potentially adding chlorine to this water. And so there's nowhere further to go. And it's as if adding an AguaClara plant doesn't actually make any progress towards the sustainable development goals, because we were already at the top because we were potentially chlorinating. So it seems like we need another rung in this ladder, and I'd like to propose that it's SWAT, it's safe water on tap. That's what we need. And so another reflection about this ladder gives you the idea that you should go from the bottom to the top. And of course, I'm going to add one more rung. The top rung should be safe water on tap, but it's not the best way to think about this, to think that you should go from no service, unimproved, limited, basic, safely managed, and then finally safe water on tap, because consumers are willing to pay more for better service. And that means that systems that go the whole way to safe water on tap are more sustainable than systems that go partway there. It's as if you were a cell phone carrier and you gave really crappy service and only 10% of the phone calls actually made it through, but you still tried to charge like 90% of what you could have charged if you had a service that worked all the time. If your cell phone service only delivers 10% of the calls, you're not going to be a favorite, and you're going to be abandoned quickly, even if you give a 10% discount. The stable service is the one that delivers a high quality service. And safe water on tap does that. It's what the consumers want, and it doesn't cost that much more to go the whole way from basic service to safe water on tap, because water treatment isn't actually that expensive. The most expensive part is the infrastructure for getting the water distributed to the households. So my point is, you shouldn't go step by step. You should actually leapfrog from no service the whole way up to safe water on tap. So this gap that we think is really big with maybe 1 million communities, it's invisible because the Sustainable Development Goals hide the need for water treatment for surface waters by making the basic service look good by having it be blue, even though it's river water on tap. They use a color scheme that suggests that basic is pretty good, even if it's untreated river water. And safely managed might not include the necessary treatment steps to achieve safe water on tap. And so that makes this big gap in the middle look invisible and makes it look like Latin America is in good shape. And calling river water on tap basic service has a human and political cost. So large institutions, USAID, Agency for International Development, World Health Organization, and UNICEF share the perspective that the water problem has largely been solved in Latin America, and so they're shifting resources away from Latin America. But I would contend that safe water isn't a luxury item. Safe water is a human right, and so there should still be a strong effort to go the whole way and not go bit by bit, but go the whole way to safe water on tap. It's been hard. Remember I had the question about why is it so hard? One of the reasons it's been so hard is because we haven't been delivering what communities want and need. We've been delivering them river water on tap, and people, quite frankly, don't like to pay for river water on tap. They would be much happier to pay for safe water on tap. And by being willing to pay, they make the whole system more sustainable. I'd like to add one more step to this. I love the idea of easy access to a sink with safe water on tap for washing hands and reducing the spread of disease within a household. You may remember this graph. This is a graph of typhoid mortality in the United States, starting in the 1900s and slowly dropping off by the time we got to around 1940. And the question is, what caused that? And I don't think we're going to ever really know for sure what caused that, because we're not willing to do the experiment again and figure out what did it. But it's something that took a really long time. It took decades. And it's pretty clear that it wasn't central water treatment. And I can show that that'll be a separate lecture. So it was something else. And I think it was something that was decentralized. And what I think it was, one of the things at least, was sinks in households. So running water inside houses and sinks so that you could come out of the bathroom and wash your hands, reducing the spread of disease within a household. So I'm excited about sinks. And so this top rung on the ladder really needs to be safe water on tap with a sink. And with that, you can really revolutionize what it's like to live in a household. A sink is critical for public health. And the estimates are that there are 3 billion people who don't have a sink with soap in their home. So the 3 billion number is what we should be aiming for. And it is possible to have safe water on tap with the sink in a country that doesn't have a lot of resources. So now, because we've been thinking about this equation for what does it take to get to success? And we've been focused on technology. We want to get to that one at the end. And we say that AguaClara program over the last decades has gotten us to a 2 on the technology, that it's a really good technology. It provides safe water. It's easy to be maintained by the communities. But now if we think about the targets, this is the world that we're working in, the SDG targets, the partners that we need to work with, and still finance, but now finance at a much bigger level, at the level of the multilateral and bilateral donors. One of the things that needs to change is we need to think about these targets, because we've been focused on our technology, but this goal that we have in the SDG 6.1 is safe water for all. But the problem is that the target doesn't quite match that goal. So we need to help shift the target to be safe water on tap And I think part of that story is getting the word out that we now have the technology so that we can do that. And so it makes sense to shift that goal. Our challenge is to extend safe water on tap to smaller communities. And here's something interesting that happens. As we're able to extend to smaller and smaller communities, the number of communities is going to really balloon, because as you go smaller in size, there are more and more communities. So as we slowly push that arrow to the left, there's more and more work for us. And I will argue that communities that want safe water on tap are right. It's a human right. There's a need for AguaClara water treatment plants. Combining safe water on tap with sinks will transform communities and improve public health. And the AguaClara Infrastructure Design Engine is a core piece of our strategy that enables us to get there. And so now I want to transition to a little bit about AID, our design engine. So here we go. These are just the processes. We have an entrance tank where the water comes in, we remove trash, we add the coagulant, we send it to a flocculator where we grow flocks, aggregates of particles that then can be removed in a clarifier, most of them, and then a few that aren't removed in the clarifier can be removed in a filter system. And now, and there's a chemical control system. Okay, so now I want to go and actually see a plant. So let's see, this is now the moment of, oh, and this is what I worried would happen. I talked too long, and so this disconnected. And so we're going to see if we can get this to reconnect in a reasonable amount of time, but this one is still alive. Okay, so here is a filter system. This is the filter that is for small communities. The filters, these are these 4 filter boxes here. And unlike the stacked rapid sand filters that we previously designed that had 6 layers of sand, these would have 2 layers of sand, 1 layer between these pipes and the second layer here. And if you look in here, that's where the layers of sand would be. And this layer of pipes is an inlet, and this layer of pipes is an outlet. And let's go back and see now if this one is, no, it's still thinking about getting ready. Okay, I'm going to hit the refresh button there and come back to this one. So we have the ability to create a table of the bill of materials at each stage as we go along in our design process. So here's the bill of materials, and it shows everything. So let's see if I can find something that I want to focus on. Okay, so look, let's look at this. Here is a clamp, and let's go find out where that clamp is located. It's located right here, and it is the clamp that is used to hold the pipe module together. And it's a stainless steel clamp. It's got a part number. You can buy it at MasterCar, and our partners would likely buy it somewhere else. And we have the ability in our design approach to have customized a database for each partner that will have the parts in it, so that when we design it for a partner, it wouldn't say buy it from McMaster-Carr in the United States. It would say buy it from their hardware source that they have as their supplier in their country. It includes the prices, and it shows that the total price for this filtration system is $7,000, or on a per liter per second basis, it's $2,000, which is actually a little bit of money, and it's expensive because this is a small scale system. Okay, now we're back and our full plant is here. So here's the full plant. So that we were looking previously at the filter system, and that's over here. And let me show you how we can highlight this. So I'm going to do the same thing where I pull up the bill of materials when it gives me control. And the bill of materials can be separated by each of the components. So let's separate it by the different modules. And now we'll get a bill of materials for each part, for each system. So for example, Here is the chemical feed system. It's highlighted in yellow. So everything that's related to feeding chemicals is in yellow. The chemical feed system for this plant costs $3,000, or it costs $1,000 for every liter per second of water provided. You may be interested in looking at what's the most expensive part here. The most expensive part is the filter, which I always find interesting because the filter does the least work of anything in the plant. It just removes a tiny little bit of what the rest of the plant didn't remove. But maybe 90% of the pathogens and particles are removed by the clarifier, but the filter gets the little bit that's left, and is the most expensive unit process. Okay, we can highlight, here is the chemical feed system, you saw that. Here is the entrance tank. So there's the entrance tank system. Here is the flocculator, the next step in the process. And then we go to the clarifier, and then finally to the filter. I want to highlight the level of detail in this system. So we're looking here at, here's the chemical feed system, and down here somewhere, let's make this a little bigger, there is a chemical resistant O-ring. Let's see if we can find that chemical resistant O-ring. Well, I know it's in this system somewhere over here. And here, let's highlight this. And look, there it is, it's highlighted, but I can't see it because it's inside this part. So I'm going to hide this part and highlight that O-ring again. So there it is, there's that O-ring. And the reason that we have that O-ring highlighted is because we have to actually buy these unions and then swap out the O-ring for one that's chlorine resistant, so that this union will actually be safe to use with chlorine. Okay, so I want to that was just to highlight the level of detail that's in these designs. There's a part number for everything and a price for everything. Another thing that I could show you quickly is we can look at what's happening in the sediment, the clarifier. We can zoom in here and we can see the inlet manifold. We can see all the diffusers that are injecting the water into the bottom of the clarifier, and see that jet reverser system. Oh, and while we're looking at the back end of at the front end of the plant, here's all the plumbing for getting the chemicals from the chemical stock tanks over to the constant level tanks, and then from there over to the doser system. So everything is there. And is there anything else I wanted to show here? I'm happy to take a quick question if somebody has one. And I think I'll quit. Like, I could spend all day in this system. It's just so powerful. But let's go back and finish off the presentation. We're almost done. AguaClara, 22 towns, 92,000 people. They're the water treatment plants in Central America, sprawling between Honduras and Nicaragua in this interesting band. I don't know why we got such a cluster. Something about the geography, I'm assuming, made that happen, because we certainly didn't plan this. How far are we along? So we want to change the world. We'd like to make the world a better place. And the question is, are we a drop in the bucket? One drop is 20 microliters. One bucket is 20 liters. That's a factor of 1 million. There's about 3 billion that need safe water. And remember, there's 3 billion that don't have a sink with soap in their house. So there's about 3 billion that need safe water. One drop is 3,000 people. We've changed the lives of 92,000. We're at 31 drops in a bucket. And there's just 999,969 drops to go. So we need your support so we can help close this gap. We've designed AID, the AguaClara Infrastructure Design Engine, so that more communities can have safe water on tap. We focused on developing AID to make these designs accessible and make them as accessible as possible, and to ensure that communities have the best available technologies. As a nonprofit, we rely on donations to fund this innovation that is already providing safe water on tap to 92,000 people. and has the potential to provide safe water on tap to many thousands of communities, not just people, but to communities. And with that, some gratitude. Gratitude multiplies with safe water on tap. And I am very, very happy to take questions or comments. It's over to you. Am I allowing you guys to talk? I forget if do I have to do anything special to allow you guys to talk? Can you talk if you want to?
Yeah,
you
a
can.
quick comment.
Yes.
It's so nice to see your face and hear all the updates, and I'm very happy that aid is coming along so well. And every time I speak to you every few months, there's just like another awesome update that you have, and it made my night and my week and my month. And thank you. Good luck.
Thank you, Yetzi. Zoe popped into the chat the link to the campaign that this is part of. So if you haven't made a donation and you're able to, we would love that. This is an exciting time for all of us. Anyone else want to jump in with another comment?
Hey, Monroe. I hope you're doing well. It's been a little while. I have a boring little technical question. What's the flow restriction device that you were mentioning with the distributed storage in India?
Wow, you were right on it. So one option is an orifice. I know that one of the problems with an orifice is that it's going to be pretty small, and so you have to worry about clogging. You can go a significant diameter larger if you use the same thing that we use for our chemical flow controllers. So if we use a dosing tube, a tube that is maybe 1/8 of an inch in diameter on the inside and maybe 1 meter or 2 long, that would be an alternative way to do it. You would have to house that inside a protective outer thing, which is actually the new design that we're proposing for our chemical dose controller. That it's actually flexible tubes that are housed inside a shell of a pipe to give them security.
Ah, interesting. Thank you.
You're very welcome. That design is still very much in the draft phase. Well,
Simon,
yeah, go ahead.
a fun technical question. It was cool to see the short stacked like sand filters. Are there any plans to prototype that in some sort of physical model, either like in a lab setting or in the field?
We would probably go straight to the field, and I know that there's some craziness associated with that, but we have a tradition of being pretty successful at going from this kind of design to the field. We have the tradition of making it work with the full scale, the deep stacked rapid sand filter. The first one that's built is still running. So yeah. I think we would do it. And the question is which community ends up getting financing and that needs a small one. There is a psychiatric hospital outside of Tegucigalpa that needs water treatment, and they would need about 3 liters per second. So this would be the perfect design for them if that ends up being a project that gets the green light.
Cool. Yeah. Thank you.
Welcome. Anyone else?
So I apologize. I kind of hopped in here at the end. So this is already touched on. My apologies, but I'm just kind of curious what the roadmap for New Jersey's is it Institute of Technology? I forget the name of the university.
Yeah.
Kind of what their say 3-year roadmap or 5-year roadmap for involvement in AguaClara Reach looks like.
And I'm not sure if I can give a 3-year roadmap, but look, they're developing a lab inside William Pennock's, who's a faculty there, inside his research lab. And it is very likely that I will be teaching the Safe Water on Tap course there this spring and doing that simultaneously at Ohio State University. So I didn't cover RIDE, Research, Invent, Design, Engage in this talk. I was just focused on technology. So you didn't miss that, Luke.
Awesome, cool. Good to hear that though.
Hey, Monroe, this is John.
Hi, John.
Hi. So when are you going to give this talk to the UN again and the World Bank as well and USAID?
I don't know what we'll have to have a good conversation about that.
Okay. I'm taking up a collection starting now for that to
Yeah.
happen.
Maybe it's soon time. There's this long road towards credibility, and you have to start at the bottom and work up. And I feel like we are making progress working up. It isn't clear to me whether we have enough credibility to go the whole way that far, but maybe we do. The doors have to open to make that possible. Thank you, John, for those kind words, though. I'm going to say goodbye, everyone. It's been a real pleasure. I love seeing you. And if you want to follow up with questions, you are more than welcome to send me an email. And goodness, Zoom is actually a thing that you can use one-on-one too. So if somebody wants to chat with me, I love reconnecting with the folks that many of you were former students or your colleagues that I would be delighted to chat with. So don't hesitate to reach out to me. Thank you so much. Thank you for your support of AguaClara Reach. Bye now.
Thanks, Monroe.